My name is Louisa Jane Smith, and this is the RE Podcast, the podcast for those of you who think RE is boring, which it is, and I'll prove it to you. Now, a fantastic new book has just come out, which I think could be the go-to book for anyone leading or even teaching RE. I think it's very hard for RE leads and teachers to find the time to access, read, and digest everything out there related to our subject. But this book summarizes all the most important things in one place. And it is an accessible, balanced, insightful, research-informed summary of what you need to know about RE other than the substantive knowledge. It draws on pedagogical pillars and research-informed practice and shows what it looks like in RE, but also puts everything in the context of what RE is and what it's trying to achieve. So it's entirely subject specific. There's simply not another book like it, and it's called Secondary RE in Action. And I'm here with its author, Joe Kinnaird, to talk more about it. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, Louisa. Thank you for having me.
No, absolute pleasure. Now, you've been on before, but just in case anyone's not quite aware of who you are, what you do, just talk a little bit about who Joe Kinnaird is.
So I've been teaching RE for, I think this will be my 10th year now. So I trained 10 years ago at IOE UCL. And then I have been working as an RE teacher at the Cooper's Company and Coburn School in Upminster, where I've had various roles such as head of Key Stage 3 RE, CPD lead, and became head of department 18 months ago. Outside of the day-to-day teaching, I regularly work with ITT providers such as the IOE in Kings to provide training for the next generation of RE teachers on things such as curriculum design, use of text and scholarship, teaching writing in RE. I'm also a member of the NATRE executive. So a lot of RE things going on professionally and outside of the classroom.
Brilliant. I mean, it's just a phenomenal list of things to do. And I think what's great, and I know you from the NATRE exec, is that actually this is not head knowledge. This is what you're living out every single day that you put into this book. But let's just talk about what it's about, like a brief summary.
So I think what I've tried to do with the book is get that fusion between looking at the research on our subject and fusing that with practical strategies. I think within our subject, there has been a lot of focus on the theoretical and the research and discussion of the abstract of what does like good RE look like in curriculum design and assessment and so on. And what I wanted to do in this book is bring that all together, where you've got a mix of the history of the subject so people know where we've gone, where we are at the moment and where we could be going in the future. Also looking at some of like the big research and big debates in the subject about the nature of what the subject's for, the possible introduction of a national curriculum, and then looking at some of the major research papers that come out, like the core report, the subject research review, the Ofsted report in 2024, and having all of that, that research out there, but then looking at, okay, what does this look like in the classroom? Because I think for a lot of teachers in our subject, I think we engage really well with the research and we're aware of the big debates and we're aware of the challenges, but we also want CPD that gives us practical things that we can try. And so what I wanted with this book was something that teachers may dip in and out of. So say, for instance, they might be really struggling with questioning in the classroom and they could read the chapter on questioning and think, well, I've got 3 strategies I could try out. Or they might be reviewing their curriculum and they're not sure where to start. And so they could read the chapter on curriculum design, now give them a flavor of the latest research, a brilliant case study from Charlotte, and one from Nikki as well, exploring how teachers have taken these ideas about curriculum design and applied it to their own context to devise a curriculum that works for their students and the needs that they have.
And that's Charlotte Newman, Nikki McGee. That might be known to people. And I think that's what's great about it. I think it's not heavy, it's really accessible and it's really practical. And you've got contributions from other people as well. So you've got different ways into the same kind of approach, but it really is very, very practical and really accessible. I'm like a big superhero fan, so I love an origin story. But what's the origin of this book? Like, at one point it didn't exist and now it does. So tell us that process.
I saw a advert on X, formerly known as Twitter, a few years ago. The publisher John Katz which is now known as Hachette Learning, was advertising a series of books which they wanted teachers to write, like an inaction book for lots of subjects within the curriculum. And I saw the advert online, and there just so happened to be RE in action book, which they were looking for someone to write. And I was crazy enough to think that I could write it. And I had to submit an application with some samples of like previous writing that I'd done, or some work that I'd done, and put forward a little bit of an argument forward about what I would like to write in the book. And somehow I managed to secure the opportunity to write the book, which is a really exciting opportunity. And that was about 3 years ago. And I think the vision for the series is yet again bringing together research on each individual subject specific books, which provide an insight into what the latest research is, and then fusing it with practical strategies about what this looks like in the classroom. And I think what's really nice about the series as well is that they are written it's the voices of classroom teachers. And I think in all of the big debates in education, both in pedagogy, teaching, and assessment, the voices of classroom teachers are often the most powerful, because we're in the trenches every day. That's what I really wanted to get across in writing the book. This is vision for our subject from a classroom teacher's perspective.
Yeah.
Here is like a range of tips and my thinking, having taught the subject for 10 years. And I think that's what I tried to do with the book, was to put something together which I think would benefit other people like me, or in a different stage of their journey of teaching art, from the trainee who's just entering the subject, who's got no idea what's going on. It can feel quite overwhelming. There's a lot of acronyms in RE, through to the ECT, who's just picking up their first set of RE classes, the experienced head of department, the passionate RE teacher who's just looking for new ideas, through to the person who's actually a geography teacher and have got 6 hours of year 9 RE on their timetable and they're not sure where to start. Write a book that would cater to everyone in the RE community.
Yeah, absolutely. And it totally does that. I found it very accessible, and it's, as you say, it's not abstract or theoretical. It uses the theory and makes it very practical and applicable to what you're going to do in the classroom the next day. And actually, as you said, each chapter can be standalone. So if you're focusing on assessment, or if you're focusing on writing, or whatever it might be, you can just read the chapter on that. And it breaks down all the latest research and then shows you step by step how to apply that to the classroom, and different techniques you can use, and really specific examples of what that looks like. Which is brilliant. You hinted there that the name Secondary RE in Action is because there's a series of books. I'm presuming there's a Secondary Maths in Action and
also a primary,
and primary as well.
Yeah.
So there's a series of books. So actually, we'll share a link to this book. It's out on the 17th of April. We'll remind you of that later. But actually there is, you can recommend this series to colleagues because I think they're just absolutely fantastic. What you said, this sort of all started 3 years ago. What was the process like of writing this?
In all honesty, it was very daunting.
Yeah.
Because it's something that I've never done before. And so it was literally a case of almost, opening a Google Doc and thinking, you write the title of the book and they think, okay, what do I put now? Quite overwhelming. And, just the nature of like trying to write something at length on anything can feel quite overwhelming. And then also, as you and I both know, and listeners to this podcast, our subject's quite messy and complicated. It's not the easiest subject to write about at times. You're like someone who's passionate and feels like they know a lot on it. And so doing justice to the complexity, richness, and nuances of debate, things within the subject felt quite overwhelming at the start. And so at the beginning of the process, what I tried to do was to almost like think of like the essentials of like, okay, if I was reading this book, what would I want to know about? So I tried to map out what I thought would be the major foundations of things to cover. And yet again, thinking back to what I said earlier about the theoretical and the practical, I wanted that those two threads going throughout it. And so I wanted to almost sort of start with like setting the scene of the subject, why the subject matters, the history of the subject, which I think when I was writing that chapter, it brought me back to my training year and the reading that I'll have done for that, and thinking of where things are at now. You can see the threads of where we've come. And then I just continued doing that for all the chapters of thinking what was the foundations of things I wanted to cover, key areas and debates in the subject, which, could have been a book in itself. Could have been.
I think because it's not, you've summarized it really succinctly. So we get a sense of the history of our subject. We get a sense of the debates. And I think that's the thing. It's not a dogmatic book. It's not saying there's one right way to do things.
Yeah.
It's looking at, here is this approach and here's this approach. And this is, the approach that most people are using now. And, it's quite balanced. It's not trying to say there is absolutely one way to do things, which I think it means that whoever's reading it can take ownership of what you're saying and think about what it looks like in their context and in their style of teaching, which is great.
Yeah.
So you've said it starts with a history of RE, which I think is really fascinating because it sets what we're doing now in context rather than just in isolation. This is just, what we do. We now know kind of why we do it. You've talked about the sort of different debates in RE. So I kind of want to then, as we've sort of started this, kind of go through like what is contained so that people, when they pick it up, they know what they're looking through, they know what they're looking for. So we've started with the history. You also kind of talk about why the subject's so important today. Kind of summarize why you think it is so important.
I think there's so many reasons. I think at a fundamental level, it's a central part of the human experience. All societies, past, present, and future, religion has been, is, and will be a part of them. I think it allows students to engage with the big questions. And, we could talk later on about some of the complications with looking at those big questions and how it's sensitive for some people. This comes into my own vision of the subject. I think students enjoy looking at those big questions about life, death, morality, nature of existence. I think students are genuinely interested about exploring answers to those big questions and hearing different ways of thinking about and answering those questions. And I think our subject plays an essential role in that.
And it's not only about that, it's the process by which you answer those questions is very applicable. So even if they're not interested in how we got here, what happens when we die, or the meaning of life, because actually not all kids like to deep it, as they quite often tell me. The process by which they're considering different points of view and critically analysing different answers, that is applicable outside of big questions, that kind of idea of critical thinking, which I think is important.
Yeah. And, I think, build upon what you said is, even if they're not interested about those big questions, each student will have their own identity, their own value, their own personal worldview. And by exploring those big questions, it's further informing their own sense of self.
100%. Yeah.
And I think that's another, role that the subject plays. I think studying RE is essentially like the study of what it means to be a human being.
Yeah.
We have links with other subjects like history, politics, art, literature. But I think its real essence is getting at what it means to be a human being. I just find it fascinating to teach. And I also think as well, in the 21st century, and we look at some of the issues and problems that we have as a society, I think RE equips them to live well.
100%.
To be well-informed citizens of the world. There's a lot of things going on in RE in terms of like the aims of the subject and what we think it's for, but I think all of these things feed into why I think the subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you're absolutely right. It's so empowering as a subject because it's not this power struggle of we have knowledge and we're going to give you that knowledge. It's here is some knowledge. Let's look at it together.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a lot of, certainly in the last few years, a move towards empowering students, and maybe it's a bit of metacognition, but I think it's bigger than that. It's thinking about what do you think about this text? And actually, let's think about what they think. And it's empowering students to be comfortable with difference. And I think that's definitely something that is maybe missing in some of the kind of mainstream stories that we're seeing, is people being comfortable that people think in different ways. And I think we provide a very structured framework for creating that nuance and creating that dialogue, that respectful dialogue, and you're absolutely right, equipping students to navigate the world that we're in. It's essential that they have certain skills that we teach in RE in order for them to flourish in the world that we're in. I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. But actually, one of the things that you talk about is the challenges in RE. So, we've got this rich history, we've got this really important role, but there are some challenges. So you kind of go through some of the main challenges, just sort of talk about what you mention in that chapter.
Well, I think the big one, and this has been one that I think has been a major challenge for last year, is that, at current time of speaking, there is no national curriculum. And obviously I was writing this book prior to the publication of the curriculum and assessment review. And obviously, it's recommended the introduction of a national curriculum, but I thought it was really important just to emphasize why I felt that was a major challenge of not having it. The quality of RE provision is almost like a postcode lottery. You could have two students who live 5 miles apart that receive a very different quality of RE, and I think we have a moral imperative to provide all students in the country with the best RE possible. I really do think that a national curriculum would raise up the standard. The nuances and all of the arguments for and against the national curriculum is a different podcast. But I did feel that's a major challenge of the subject in the last few. Also, I wrote in the book about subjects not meeting their legal obligation to teach RE. We've got Nat data suggests to us that 40% of schools are not fulfilling their statutory duty to teach RE to all pupils. It's not right. Schools are delivering RE through the back door, through assemblies, or not at all. All students deserve high quality RE, and they're not getting it. The amount of teaching time for the subject is another major challenge. There's huge inconsistencies with the RE provision that is provided in schools. 13% of schools are delivering less than the off-qual recommended teaching time for the full course RE GCSE. That wouldn't happen for maths. That wouldn't happen for English or science. So why is it happening for our subject? And we see RE, as I mentioned earlier, RE through the back door, through drop-down days, or through assemblies. You wouldn't deliver a core part of a geography curriculum through an assembly. So I'm not sure why there are people in our sector who think RE can be delivered in that way. The challenges that I think the subject faces, the recruitment of teachers. It's been an ongoing challenge for our subject. And, as we've spoken about before, you can have all these amazing developments in our subject and all these brilliant conversations about curriculum design and the richness of debate and discussion you can have in a classroom. But if you don't have qualified RE teachers to deliver, and all of the things we were talking about earlier about the aims of the subject and why we think it's important in the 21st century, it's not possible if we don't have the teachers to deliver.
100%.
And so, yet again, the RE policy unit, reveals that in 23-24, and 285 trainees enrolled, 44% of their goal.
Yeah.
It's not enough.
No.
And
that's year on year. That's not just a one-off. That's been for the last 10 or 11 years, isn't it? And I think this is the thing, isn't it? Is that, I genuinely believe bad RE does more harm than good. And so if we, and I don't think a national curriculum is the answer to all of our problems, but I think it's part of the reason it's not valued, it's not invested in, it hasn't got subject enhancement courses anymore. There's no bursary. It's been completely underfunded, underlooked, and not recognised. And actually, what the curriculum assessment review said is its importance is not recognised in its current national standing. And so this has a lot of problems for recruitment and staffing and training and CPD and resourcing and consistency and high quality RE. You're absolutely right. And I think it's important people understand the challenges in the 21st century for the subject in order to make an informed decision about how we move forward as a subject, and understanding the importance of it. So therefore, what is the consequences of not having high quality RE? And it actually does more harm than good. And I think that's really important. The next thing you talk about is sort of different approaches to RE. And you kind of have a look at, you sort of weigh them up and look at the sort of strengths and weaknesses of them. Now, one is, oh my gosh, and I can never say this word, phenomenological approach.
Well done, spot on.
First time, come on, where it's kind of very much based in sort of Ninian smarts that, that there are very specific phenomena that are found in all religions. So there is a story and there is a ritual and there is ethics. Talk to us about some of the other ones.
So with the other ones which we have spoken about, phenomenological, the interpretive approach, put forward by Bob Jackson. This is the idea that religion is not just an academic construct. We want to look at the lives of people different to our own and make sense of that lived experience. Alongside that, we have the human development pedagogical approach. This is the idea that RE is grounded in questions of making meaning, big focus on ethics and morality. And with this pedagogical approach, we want to provide students with a space to reflect on how these ideas relate to their own lives. Critical realism is another pedagogical approach where students are looking to assess evidence presented by statements of belief and make judgments about competing truth claims. It's really encouraging students to critically assess whether there's any truth in the claims presented by one religion that they're looking at, or a multitude of religions, depending upon the topic. And then concept cracking is this idea that, when we're teaching RE, we're developing students' ability to explore the phenomena of a religion. They're looking at universal concepts that underpin ideas within religion. So justice, worship, or it could be a specific concept within a religion like the Trinity or the Imamate. And yet again, students are exploring the concepts, to a substantive emphasis on the substantive knowledge approach. And then the final two that I spoke about are deconstructionalism. I struggled with that one. It's about the individual student constructing their own worldview based upon what they're encountering in the RE classroom and finding their own meaning from what's being explored. And then the experiential approach uses activities such as meditation or drama to move the student beyond the academic towards the emotions and spiritual development that religion can provide. And, when I was writing that section of the book, I was thinking back to my own RE lessons of that week and thought, where have I used any of this pedagogical approach in my classroom, or is there one of them that doesn't really align with my own vision of the subject? I did want to emphasize for balance is that, all visions of RE are valid, and across a teaching day, across a teaching week, across a teaching year, you will use a variety of pedagogical approaches.
Yeah.
And I think it was just important just to give teachers an awareness of the research of pedagogical approaches out there that is sort of in the background of what they do.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've spoken earlier about students finding meaning and their own personal worldview. You can see that in the pedagogical summaries, and there is no one approach. We draw upon a lot. We draw upon a lot based upon what we think is most important for what we're teaching and the aim of the lesson or the scheme of work.
Yeah. And so actually you don't want the tail to wag the dog, is that you don't just choose an approach and you always use that one. You have to select the approach that's going to most effectively teach whatever it is you want to teach that day or within that section of the lesson. And I think that's important to understand the different approaches, understand the strengths and weaknesses of them so that you can make an informed selection of which one is the most effective. The other thing it does, which I think is nice, and just let me know if I miss one out, it looks at the sort of main documents that sit behind RE. So over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. So it looks at the National Content Standard, it looks
Yep.
at the core report, so the Commission
Yeah.
on RE, it looks at the Curriculum and Assessment Review, and it looks at the Ofsted Subject Report, Deep and Meaningful. Is that
That's it.
they're the kind of main ones. And I think that, as I said before, teachers don't often have the time to read everything or know what they have to
Mm.
read because there's a lot of stuff out there. And what you've done is selected the most important documents, summarized them, but also put a link to them so people can read the full one because they know that actually that's a really important one to read. And I
Yeah.
think that's really, really helpful. So thank
Thank
you
you.
for doing that. The other thing that I found really helpful, because as you said, we're quite a messy subject. And I think partly we haven't had a national curriculum. So there's lots of stuff out there.
Mm.
Really helpful table that's like, here's all the places that you can go for different types of support, and this is
Yeah.
what they offer. So,
Yeah.
whether it's RE hubs or whether it's, NatTray, RE online, all of those different things, you've selected the ones that are the most important for teachers to engage with and just given a really
Mm.
helpful summary of what they offer.
Oh, yeah, I found that helpful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So then it talks a bit about multidisciplinary RE. So we've just been talking about different approaches to RE. And
Mm.
sort of the latest thing is this sort of multidisciplinary RE. Just sort of summarize what that is.
Well, I think in recent years, we've had a lot of discussion about different types of knowledge in our,
Mm,
and I think as you know, as we've progressed, we've got a far better understanding of the different types, and they're becoming quite regular conversations in our subject. The first would be substantive knowledge, which is essentially like the stuff or the substance of RE. So that's like key beliefs of a religious or non-religious tradition, sacred texts, holy buildings, concepts that relate to religious or non-religious traditions. It's essentially the things they need to do that we want or need them to know. And then in recent years, there's been a lot more development on disciplinary knowledge, and it really is like an ongoing area of debate and development um, in our subject. Richard Quay has done a lot of, produced a lot of great work on this alongside other thinkers in our community, and it's sometimes referred to as like ways of knowing to know, um, and it's this idea that it can provide us with a way into the substantive. There are lots of disciplines that can further inform our teaching of the substantive, but the multidisciplinary approach often draws upon theology, which is exploring like the nature of belief, how beliefs have changed, where they have come from, their authority and consistency. We often draw upon philosophy, which focuses on thinking and the process of reasoning. And we also have the human and social sciences, and this can explore the lived experience of belief itself and how that impacts upon the individual, community, and wider society. What's really nice, I think, about the disciplines is that they provide us with ways of asking different questions about the substantive. And so, for instance, theology can get us asking questions such as, what does it mean for something to have authority? What is the origin of this belief? What are the diverse ways that this concept can be understood? Philosophy gets us asking questions such as, does this argument make sense? Is some types of evidence more convincing than others? The human and social sciences discipline allows us to look at how might belonging to a particular religion impacts someone's identity. What do we mean by the term religion? So it's getting us to think about the substantive in a different way, which is really exciting development for our subject. And with teaching the disciplinary, what I tried to do in one of the chapters was just give the reader a few like pitfalls to avoid, because it is new to us. We make mistakes along the way. when thinking about subjects in a different way. So some of the pitfalls we want to avoid, we want to ensure that we don't blur the boundaries. So, when using like ways of knowing within a classroom, I think it's really important to emphasize, like, if we looked at this from a theological perspective or from a philosophical perspective, does this idea make sense? I also think it's important to avoid oversimplification. Just giving an opinion is not thinking like a philosopher.
Yeah.
And so it's really important that we look at the disciplines, and we take our time to think, how are we using this within a curriculum to really drive student thinking. The third type of knowledge is personal knowledge, and I got Arabella Saunders to write a case study on this, because with my case studies in the book, I really wanted to use RE teachers who are either really passionate about some aspect of teaching RE, but also can bring it to life in a way that I've not thought about.
Yeah.
She's done a lot of great work on personal knowledge in the classroom, and she explores, what it means to encounter, interpret, understand, and engage with the world. And then she speaks about various ways in which we can bring it into the classroom.
And I think this is what I love about the book, is there's an intellectual humility on your part, whereas you're going, actually, I know someone who's really good at this or has done this really well, that's going to offer a different perspective, because this is not just your perspective. There's loads of collaborators, which you've mentioned earlier. I think the other important thing to realize is that RE is not the only multidisciplinary subject. And that if you have a look at I don't know very much about this, what this looks like outside humanities, but I know history and geography have multidisciplinary approaches to the subject. So they'll have their substantive content, but then in history, they might do like change of continuity or whatever. And, in geography, they might do, mapping or whatever it might be. So I think this is not unique to RE. And I think what this does is it brings equity between the subjects, that there isn't one way of, RE is not special or unique in this way, in that this is what is seen as the best approach to effectively teaching your subject is through disciplinary lenses. So this is kind of, I guess, that then is the first third of your book, really, isn't it? Because that's really looking at what sits behind RE in terms of its history, the approaches, and the kind of multidisciplinary sort of lenses. The next chapter is really, really good, because what it does is it pulls everything together that you've said. And what it does is it tells you step by step how to write a good RE curriculum. So that's what you were saying earlier, that this is not just theoretical or abstract. It actually applies what the theory and the evidence and the research says and what it actually looks like in practice. It's brilliant. And people are going to have to go away. We're not going to be able to do it justice. But if you could kind of maybe give your 3 top tips, or maybe things to avoid when you're creating a curriculum.
Just 3. I think the first thing I would say is, in the book, what I tried to do in that chapter was to start with the latest reading on there. So I wanted to do justice to the REC Religion and Worldviews project, which is got a lot of great tips and strategical guidance in there for curriculum design. So I wanted to do it for that. And so I started with that. My first tip would be, don't look at what others do and think you have to do the same. I see so much great RE practice. I see so much great RE practice from other teachers in other schools and in other contexts with different needs. And that last bit is the key bit to focus on. They have their own context, their own needs, and that's the curriculum that they've devised, which is going to best support their students. And that's a really important thing to bear in mind, is that, you don't have to do exactly what others do, because you can't take the end result and just think that's what you need in your context. So I think first thing is to think about your own context, your own need, and start from there. I think the second thing is to just be really clear on the core concepts and golden threads in your own curriculum. There's a case study in there from Charlotte Newman, who loads of questions about the curriculum choices in her own context. And the question there on the core concepts, golden threads, is, what are the things that run throughout your curriculum? And I think doing that with your own department where you sit down and think, well, what are the threads that run through our scheme of learning, and almost in a way start at the very end. And one way, I don't really get a chance to write about it in the book, but I really like this idea of like the curriculum as like a narrative of a TV show. Think about your favorite TV show. You often think of it as a TV show that has plots that run across the whole series. You've got plots that run throughout an episode. You've got plots that will end, but were for a few episodes. You've got plots that run across series. Almost like, there's a lot going on there, but it's threads and concepts and ideas continuously explored and revisited with increasing nuance and complexity. What you don't
It's
want.
almost looking at the curriculum holistically, isn't it? It's like not
Yeah.
looking at each individual unit, and we
Mm,
need to teach them this, then we need to teach them this, and we need to teach them this. It's taking your students on a journey
yeah.
where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end,
Yeah.
where, concepts and knowledge and skills are building logically and building on each other,
Mm,
so that you've got, what's the word I'm looking for? It's got to be
coherent.
coherent,
Yeah.
and it's got to show them what it looks like to get better, and they've got to build on previous units. So you have to know where they're ending up, so you know how to get there. And I think in the past, what we've done is like we have to do a lesson on Judaism, we have to do a lesson
Yeah.
on CQ, we have to do a lesson on Christian, or a unit on each of those things. And actually, what they're not doing is seeing the connection or seeing the
Yeah.
threads or building knowledge logically. And I think that's almost what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah. I think, a curriculum is a narrative that's told
Yeah,
over time, and almost
yeah,
going to the end and thinking, well, what would you want a year 9 student to know
yeah,
about a range of religious traditions? What would you want them to be able to do
yeah.
by the end of year 9? And then using that summary and then using that summary to think, okay, what are we doing within year 7 in the autumn term to help fulfill that? And so I think being really clear on the concepts and the golden threads within your curriculum is something that's really important. I think well, it's never done.
Yes.
Never done. It's, this is a living document. This is something that is constantly tweaked and revisited, quick tweaked and revisited throughout the academic year, throughout teaching of the scheme of work. And I think like having those constant conversations with your teachers who are teaching it of what's working well. What's working well? What do we need more of? What do we need? And, it's really hard to do that at times when it's something that you've worked on for a long time.
100%. You feel very protective over it.
Style.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You've got to be brutal.
Yeah. And actually, one point that you make very effectively is that you have to select. You can't teach everything.
Yeah.
And that kind of Goldilocks zone between breadth and depth.
Mm,
And an example from my own practice is, so I've been part of writing a curriculum for a multi-academy trust in London, which has been incredible. And I wrote a unit on Sikhi. And I'm very aware, having written it and taught it, there's too much in it. The balance is not right. And
yeah.
so I'm having to now take some bits out. So a really good example is I've got a lesson on, the unit is all about service. No, the unit's on equality. And so we're looking at all the different ways that equality is shown within Sikhi, right back to its sort of, creation, its origins, all the way through to the lived experience of Sikhs today. And I've got a lesson on that includes stuff on the 5Ks, which is kind of your classic stuff that you teach with Sikhi.
Yeah.
And when looking at what I need to now take out, I actually don't need to do all of the 5Ks in order to teach the students about the importance of equality.
Mm,
I could just take the Kara.
mm,
And I could just focus on one of the 5Ks, which is the one that most Sikhs tend to wear.
yeah.
Not all Sikhs wear all 5Ks. That's the one that is most worn if you look at the sort of data. And that's why we're using a multidisciplinary approach, because actually we can look at data of lived experiences and look at that as a symbol and connect it to Waheguru, connect it to equality, connect it to unity. And actually they're going to have a much richer experience of Sikhi by just looking at one rather than looking at an overview of all 5, which then is going to be unnecessary and complicated. But I think we're almost sometimes completionists and we have to complete the set. So we have to do all 5.
Yeah.
We actually don't. And it's making those curriculum choices of what to leave out is really important to get that balance between breadth and depth.
Yeah. And also as well, I think, building upon that is, we want space to explore things in depth, but also where are we getting significant levels of challenging?
Yeah.
I think, Nikki McGee spoke about this before of like, it's very easy if we're teaching, I don't know, say if we're teaching Buddhism and we do the life of the Buddha and exploring that in an hour's lesson. Is there better use of time in that lesson where a homework task could be set where they recap the story, and in lesson we look in far more detail at aspect of the Buddha's life and thinking of, we can cover material in different ways, and are we using our lessons to, challenge students more and develop that higher order thinking?
So I think it's a great chapter. The case studies from Charlotte and Nikki are brilliant because they show different approaches, different questions they asked, how they did it. But there is literally a step-by-step, like, look here, look at this, do
Yeah.
that, think about that, plan this. It's brilliant. Try not to do that, do this. It's great. So we've got the history, we've got the challenges, we've got the importance, we've got the approaches, we've got curriculum design. The next sort of section, the next few sort of chapters look on sort of pedagogical practices, and it
Yes.
takes that sort of science of learning and all the research that's been done, and Rosenshine's principles, etc., and it shows very, very clearly what that looks like in an RE classroom today. So it goes through explanation and modeling, questioning, writing, assessment, feedback, using texts and scholarships. So it's a chapter on each of those.
Mm.
Now, we are going to do a further episode on questioning because I saw your talk at Strictly, and it was one of the best talks I've ever been to. So
I think you're right.
and it was just very, again, just accessible and practical and balanced and research informed. And I'm talking from someone with ADHD who really struggles in CPD sessions, but I was engaged, and it's brilliant.
Thank you.
What we're not going to be able to do in this podcast episode is go through each of those chapters and give people a sense of how to do each of those things. They're going to have to read the book. But what it would be great for you to do is maybe talk about your experience. Which of those, or which technique in any one of those kind of areas do you feel has been the most impactful in your classroom?
Well, that's a good question. When I entered at this point in my teaching career, I think one of the best compliments I could get from a student is if they said to me, I can explain stuff really well. And if ever got that compliment, I would think I'm doing something right. And, we've spoken about RE being complex and messy, and there's so much going on in our subject, and kids are seeing a lot online, they're hearing a lot of conversations outside of the classroom, and I think if we have a safe space where the teacher can explain things well, can explain things in a way that it prompts further questions from kids, or it really answers a question that they've got, or we can really explain the origin and significance of a belief or the importance of a practice, I think that does wonders for our subjects, and that's something I value a lot. So within explaining, there's so many things that you could look to draw upon. I've become a big fan of Freya models. I remember from your session at Strictly, just to return the compliment, which was
That's very sweet.
I think the Freya models I think are really helpful for like explaining key pieces of vocabulary, especially for quite abstract concepts. So the way a Freya model works would be that you give a new piece of vocabulary alongside its definition and potentially its etymology. You provide examples of that. You give characteristics of that concept, and then you give some non-examples. So the example that I include in the book is monotheist. So we give a definition of it, person who believes in the existence of God. We give the etymology of it, mono, one, theist, belief in a God. We give examples of it, so Christian, Muslim, Jew. We have characteristics of being a monotheist, so the belief in a supreme being that possesses qualities such as omniscience, omnipotence, whatever they may be. And then non-examples. So we give the non-examples of polytheist and atheist. And it works really well, I think, as a way for explaining and giving that initial teaching of abstract concepts in our subject.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. And Although I've said, and we've both said this, and I think this is true, that each chapter is a standalone. So if you're looking at assessment, or you're looking at writing skills, or you're looking at questioning, you can just read those chapters. I think the other thing to say, but actually as a whole, each one feeds into another. So, in terms of like writing a curriculum, when we're talking about those endpoints, how you assess and what you're going to assess is going to inform your curriculum design, is going to inform the lessons. And so, I will say you can read them standalone, but actually you should also have a holistic look at everything you do feeding into sort of the same journey that the students go on as well, and I think you do that very effectively. One bit that really stood out to me, and this is because of the number of conversations that I have with teachers, is about writing. How do I get my children or my students to write more? They're writing badly, or they don't want to write, or they're struggling with 12 markers. So I think the section on extended writing, because it teaches you how to write in RE, and it also focuses on Key Stage 3, which I don't think we often do. I think we focus an awful lot on our 12 markers or on our AO1, AO2 essays at A level. I don't think anyone's really looked at step-by-step instructions and techniques to get your Key Stage 3 students to write, and how to write evaluatively. And there's some really practical tips on how to do that. So if you have got students, and I know there are people listening that are going to share this same problem, my kids are not writing, I don't know how to teach evaluation, my kids are struggling with 12 markers, that section of the extended writing is absolutely brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
And I think what I really like is that there's lots of tables. It's not just chunks of writing. So, for a brain like mine, I'm not very good at learning through reading paragraphs. And what you quite often do is just like look at the information in tables, and it's all organized really nicely. It's absolutely fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
So then the last section really deals with two quite important topics. One is how to teach controversial and sensitive topics in RE. And you mentioned that earlier, when you've got teachers with other specialisms teaching RE, that nuance of how to teach those subjects, those difficult, sensitive, controversial topics, is such a skill that you really do need to have training on how to do that. So there's a section on that, and then also how to promote RE beyond the classroom. So let's get some final tips based on those two things just as we close. What are your top tips for teaching controversial and sensitive topics?
I think with the top for teaching a controversial and sensitive topic, you almost want to break it down into two. I think firstly, you got to think about prior to the lesson. With prior to the lesson, I think really focus on, with a controversial topic, why are we teaching it? It needs to be for learning, not just engagement or relevance. No, bad RE is something's happened on the news recently, and I think, we could do a lesson on this.
Yeah.
Or use this as a starter. Controversial topics, as I show in the book, are ones that are emotionally charged. We should not be teaching controversial topics purely for engagement. The focus needs to remain on thoughtful, intellectual discussion in a respectful environment. And it's a topic we need to approach academically. So I think those are things to bear in mind prior to the lesson. I also think it's super important to plan ahead with any controversial topic you're teaching, and almost anticipate what sensitive questions could you get, and having answers for those questions. I'm trying to think of an example. So say, for instance, if it's abortion, for instance, they might ask you about the legal status of abortion in the UK. They might ask you about statistics of abortions in the UK. And you don't have to know these word for word, but it's about being prepared for what you get. And also as well, not just questions that you get, but what might the opinions be on the room? What responses might you get if you're teaching about animal rights, or if you're teaching about pacifism? What are the common thoughts that kids might have in the classroom? So I think just being aware of that. And then the second part of the tips is, I think, during the lesson. And there's various things that you might want to bear in mind during the lesson when teaching a controversial topic. Something I do a lot of, I sort of like preface the lesson with like an initial speech about the importance of open-mindedness. And I will say, we're teaching about X, and this is a controversial and contested topic. I'll tell them in advance what we're going to do. So we're going to look at some data surrounding it. We're going to explore a range of religious attitudes to it and arguments for and against, say, for instance, assisted dying, but really emphasize to them that I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm not trying to convince you of a certain way of thinking or tell you that you're wrong, and just really promote open-mindedness. I also think it's important to challenge vague views. Sometimes I hear people say that, RE is just your opinion. And I don't agree with that. I think it doesn't mean you can just say what you like on the grounds that it's what you think. I think the RE classroom provides with the opportunity to have an informed opinion. We hear vague views. I think we have a responsibility to challenge them. And I think it's very important for us to also think about how we challenge them. So when you're providing counterpoints or you're challenging views, it's really important to stay neutral,
Yes.
respectful, especially if it's a topic that you care personally about.
Yeah.
But I think it shows to the student that you're not telling them what they think is wrong, because with certain topics, I think if we go in saying, no, you're wrong to think this, I think that could put a barrier up that we want to remove. Asking open-ended questions to students to get them to explore their own positionality a little bit further, and then like showing benefits of counterpoints,
Yeah.
benefit of knowing something from a different point of view, because even if you think X about assisted dying, it's beneficial for you to know why someone would think differently to you. But if you changed your mind, here's why other people think differently to you. And then just teaching them, like, I think, effective discussion skills, like how to add to their line of thinking, how to build on a line of argument, or challenge a line of argument. And, there's a lot more in the book, how we can further support ourselves when teaching challenging topics.
Even the choice of words we use in a question. So if you said to somebody, why might somebody disagree with you, then it's much less antagonistic than go, well, what do other people think? Because it's what it's saying, it's saying that there might be another alternative and you could explore that. And I think that kind of language is great. I think you're right. I think the bit about not choosing controversial subjects in your lessons in order to engage, I think is really important. And that stood out to me because that's a mistake I've made in the past, that I've believed that certain topics in RE are more engaging and I want to try and do those. I think that's really important. One other thing you said is about creating that space for people to have different opinions. And I think the phrase that always sits behind that is that, there are more than one right, although there are wrongs. And I think you talked about that sort of responsibility we have to sort of kindly challenge ideas that maybe are not founded in reason or compassion or, are not informed. I think we have a responsibility to do that. And there's a bit on Karen Steele, who's been on the podcast before, about intellectual humility. And that's really hard because for us, we've often done all the research. We know everything. We've thought about it. We know what our opinion is. It's really hard to take a step back from our own thoughts because they're so well thought through and create a space for other children and other voices to be listened to. And it's hard not to have an agenda when you're talking about certain controversial issues.
I think as well, there's I think I did include it. But often you might get the question of, Miss, what do you think?
Yes.
And that's a really difficult one.
Yes.
And I think, first of all, it's really important to provide that DofE guidance on political impartiality.
Yes.
Needed in there. But, I do think there's some intellectual merit for students of like hearing the positionality of a teacher of, here's why I think this is a contested area, without revealing what you think.
Yes.
Another great compliment you can get as a teacher is students not knowing what you believe or think.
Yeah.
If I can make it to the end of year 11 without them knowing what I think, I've done a great job.
Yeah.
And I think that can really help promote that intellectual humility where a teacher, this is why I and many other people struggle with what to think about the use of nuclear weapons, or why we should adopt a pacifist approach.
Yeah. So you're almost showing them how you think, not what you think.
Yeah.
Which is really powerful, isn't it? But there's actually a brilliant table in this chapter, which I think is so helpful. And it's basically the advantages and disadvantages of sharing your own opinion.
Yes.
So you're saying, the advantages of sharing your own opinion is that, all of these different things. And then you've got a list of things that actually, by doing this, here are the kind of pitfalls that you can fall in. So it could be that students feel that they have to have the same opinion as you, or if they disagree with you, it could affect the relationship you have with that person. And so it, but it actually looks about, sort of the advantage of doing it, because, you are an adult and they're a child and they want guidance and they want support and they want ideas that they can kind of wrestle with. But actually, I quite like that idea of showing the students how you think, not what you think, and that actually that becomes, your actual opinion becomes vague. I think that's great. So it's a brilliant chapter. The final chapter is so rich, and I think, we've been chatting as I've been reading it, and I've really enjoyed it. But one of the things I said to you is it almost kind of gets better, and I think the last chapter is so rich. It kind of goes out with a bang. I mean, it covers so much. It talks about trips, it talks about visits, it talks about speakers, it talks about using film in your classroom. It talks about how to raise the profile of RE in your setting. So it's really looking at the sort of like periphery of not just what happens in the classroom, but also what else is happening around the subject. And it's sort of, it, hold on, I've just lost my notes now. And it's what's interesting, if you speak to a lot of RE teachers at the moment, one thing they really struggle, and we kind of mentioned this at the beginning, is the status of the subject in the school. What do you think for you has been the most effective way to promote RE and raise the kind of profile of RE?
I think the things that have helped me are, I think, making your voice heard.
Yeah.
As a classroom teacher and as a subject, making your voice heard, so you're part of the conversation about the importance of your subject. So I think like regular contact home, I think something's been really, like, in positive ways.
Yeah.
In positive ways, I think back at a recent parents' evening, and a boy who, like, based on the description, you would not think would enjoy RE. And dad said, "I don't know what you're doing in those lessons, but he absolutely loves it." I think it's just, regular contact home of praise
Yeah.
really well, because I mean, I'm not a parent, but I don't know if the phone goes and it's school. I imagine the
It's going to be
well,
something bad.
something positive is quite nice. I think positive phone calls are really good. I think I think as well, like, just linking in with the extracurricular, like providing opportunities for trips, I think really helps promote the subject, because it brings the subject to life in a way that I think is essential. We've spoken a lot about, like, the lived experience of religion. You're not gonna really get to grips with that unless you go to, like, a place of worship, or unless you go to a museum where you can come into contact with artifacts, or if you are able to speak, have guest speakers, or go to a talk. And I think those things, or go to a place of worship. And I think those experiences offer the opportunity to give students, a really rich insight to religion, and can promote the subject beyond the classroom. Because I think, people see the links with, oh, this is something that we see in society, or this is something that's, relevant to our lives right now. And, they see it when they walk to and from school, they see it when they go into the city, they see it on the news. And I think that can really help promote that religious literacy, and that aim of the subject of being an informed citizen, which I think most students want to be. Most students want to be, and most parents will want that for their children too.
Do you know what? It sounds simple, but it's really radical, because I think often we try to promote RE from the top down. So we're
Mm,
trying to get maybe SLT to value it more, or get more curriculum time, or employ a specialist. And actually, what you're almost suggesting is it's kind of bottom up. Actually, start with the students and start with their parents, and
yeah.
provide a rich curriculum, provide excellent teaching, give them those kind of experiences.
Mm.
And actually, that will then feed up,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah,
So it's almost, I mean, it's my economic policy as well. I don't believe in trickle down economics. It's like, let's push up, But I think, I think it's a really accessible, simple answer to a problem many of us have in schools, which is, a lack of support for the subject. That's really, really lovely. Your mum is dedicated, your book is dedicated to your mum.
yeah.
Why is that?
Oh, she's just an incredible human being, and she's done. an amazing job of raising me and my brother, and she's such a role model in how she carries herself, and she's always supported me in every aspect of my life, both personally and professionally. And like from a young age, she's always encouraged me to read, and she's always, pushed me, to explore new opportunities. And it was just one way in which I could show my gratitude and thanks for being an incredible mother.
Oh, Joe, that's so beautiful. What's her name? Are we allowed to just know her name and give her a shout out or not?
Gina. Her name's Gina.
Gina.
Yeah.
Kinnaird as well, with the same
Yeah.
surname?
Yeah.
Gina Kinnaird. Big
Yeah.
love to you for producing Joe. Thank you so much. Now, just where can we buy it? When can we buy it? How much is it?
You can buy it from various places. You can buy it from Amazon. You can buy it from Hachette directly. I believe it's available on Waterstones and Foils. And if you buy it through Hachette, I believe you can receive a discount.
Yeah, we've got an exclusive discount for RE podcast listeners. So if you put in the code SRE10, that's SRE10, you'll get a 10% discount from Hachette Learning. So if you're trying to boycott other places that sell books, that will give you probably the biggest discount that's available out there on the books. That's exclusive to you guys. And it's out on
17th of April.
17th of April. So we're going to release this episode on the 17th of April, which is the day that it is released. So please, please, please grab a copy for your department. And I think this is going to really, really nourish you and equip you and empower you to be even better than you already are, guys. Joe, thank you so much for spending the last 3 years researching, writing this book and providing this for us. It's phenomenal. It's one of the best books on RE that I've ever read. I've only read 2 and this is one of them. But that says a lot that I managed to get from the beginning to the end. If I can read it, it means that it's accessible to anybody. This is not just hyperbole. This genuinely is a brilliant book.
No,
And so we really appreciate you, doing this. Thank you so much.
thank you very much.
My name is Louisa Jane Smith, and this has been the RE podcast, the podcast for those of you who think RE is boring, but it's not. It could make us the best teachers of the best subject in the school, but certainly the most needed one. But thank you so much for letting us bore the life out of you.